they do with a beaver? Why is the beaver number one? So what we're going to do is show, this is when you catch a beaver, you skin it, you dry it, you wash it, and then as it's wet, you stretch it on this hoop. So there might be 20 of them around your camp just drying. It'll take a couple days, they're dry. This is just cardboard, it's a pizza box. That's all it is. Because they don't want that. They just want the fur. So what they're going to do with the fur, so it's dried like that. Now, our people could, of course, the women would certainly be able to soften the animal skin by as it's drying, if you soaked it in the animal brain, believe it or not, it has oils and proteins. And as it's drying, it's doing this, and it's breaking it. So by the time it's dry, it's pure white and softened, because we just stretch it. There's a dozen ways that you can do that. But you can do it around a tree or around a rope that's stuck to the ground. Any way you can do it. Have two people have tug of war, is that you can break this fiber down and make it into a soft leather. Likewise, a deer skin, as you remove the hair, it's just the leather, and you can make it into what I'm wearing is just garment leather. Just leather, no hair. But when the animals have a fur, you want to keep the fur. So like a bear skin or even a moose robe, I suppose, but that is treated like a deer usually. But the softened leather is made into, it's smoked. So they would smoke it golden color. So when we get that buckskin leather and it's kind of got that gold color, it's an imitation attempt to harken back to smoked animal Indian brain tan leather. That's really what that is representing. Otherwise, leather is white. It's pure white, but it can mildew, so you have to smoke it. Plus, when it gets wet and dries, it'll turn into a piece of cardboard, and you're not getting that back. But if it's smoked, it adds more oils back into the leather, and the more smoked it is, almost to chocolate brown sometimes. I remember going to Alaska, and when I saw the Athabascan ladies dance by, they all had these dark chocolate brown dresses. Your eyes would almost water. It was so, that brain can smell of that smoking up there was really more than any place I've ever, but you know, when we have these hides, you open the trunk and you're like, woo, because some people can't deal with it. Some people love it. So they got a brain can hide and they're making moccasins for reenacting like we do. If they have an apartment, their whole apartment smells like it's like a smoke camp. But some people like it, some can't stand it. Maybe it depends on the type of smoke. So rotten birch bark or corn cobs or whatever you use or your family would know, you'd go, that looks like Blackfeet or Athabascan leather. You can almost tell. I could tell if you held one up in the back, you go, where's this from? I go, Saskatchewan. It's like, yep. I might even know the family just by the color of it. I mean, some of these people today, there's not enough of it out there so that when you do see it, you can probably tell the source. Pretty funny that way. In the old days, everybody did. But the more you smoke it, the more, and then you sew 8 of these together, and you make a beautiful robe, okay? So he's gonna, and I only need so many for my family. Each one of us gets a beaver robe, and so on. But really, what they're gonna do with it in Europe is, make sure everybody can see. So there's 2 hairs. One is a long guard hair, and one is the soft wool. We call it in French the laine de castor, the wool of the beaver. So under a microscope, you could see my kid's microscope, science project, A. The thick one is the guard hair, the thick one, and they throw that away. They're gonna pluck that away to certain craftsmen. And the other ones, you can't really see it, but on this one, you could see barbs, like a rose thorn. And you can see that clearly under this one. This is the wool. It has barbs and hooks on it. So when they, please come up, we have a whole hour after the talk, you can handle all this stuff. They're gonna make something with that. They're gonna make a certain product. What could that product possibly be? I can't for the life of me think what they're going to do with beaver fur. What could they possibly, gee, I wonder what that thing could be. How, what could it is hat, yes. It is a hat. It's a felt hat. Best cowboy hat today. Charlie One Horse, Stetson will say the number of beaver that are used, not a percentage so much, but the number of beaver apparently that's used, and it'll say right in the rim. So the beaver felt hat, the rims could be, the brims rather, could be this wide, and they're very strong, and they'll last 40 years. Because the hooks hold those hairs together when it's belted and pressed into this form. Whereas other wools, like wool from a sheep or rabbit, won't do that. They don't have the hooks. It's the only animal that has that. With rabbit, this has nothing to do with pennock hooks, but it kind of does. It tells you why the drive for the fur trade is really why. So rabbit just doesn't work. It can a little bit because it has a slick coating that took mercury to take the slick coating off. Then it would static electricity. You could press it together, it'll hold. You can mix it with beaver, so a mix. But the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland is because he worked with rabbit fur and the mercury, and when he ate his lunch, guess what he had on his hands? Beaver felt? No, mercury. So the Mad Hatter caused insanity, nerve. Anybody a doctor here? Tell me what actually happens with mercury poisoning. It's not good. It's toxic to humans. So the kum it's not mercury anymore, is it? I mean, you can't. Well, maybe in small amounts in some traditional places, I could imagine. But boy, we get our red paint from Indian kum stores, and we mix it with bear oil, or we use it, but it's not mercury anymore. This is it's mined in China and even Spain, I understand. And it was cinnabar, and it's from cinnabar we get the vermilion, bright vermilion red powder today is what they call it in French. So the vermilion. We had red ochre, which is the natural iron ore pigment, so a nice brick color. As my buddy Tony says, a beautiful huma color, huma in that Oklahoma. Oklahoma, the red people. That's what huma means red. Okala is the people. The red people. So Oklahoma means the red people. And but that beautiful huma color is a brick color. And that's the natural. But so there might be times when you have a ceremony that I have this vermilion, and it's very expensive. And I think there's vermilion. I can't remember if there's actually vermilion on this. I believe there is. I'm not going to go sit there and try to read. But that just that alone, red is a good luck color around the world. It's the color of fire, life, and blood, especially. So when you animate ourselves and our objects with red, that puts it in a different category. But the women now, the Ojibwe women said, well, we don't want, and I assume when I say Ojibwe that the similar beliefs are right here too. Same Algonquin people, same customs, same. So when they said the women were doing a dye lot to dye some porcupine quills, they wouldn't allow the men to look into the red dye, because if they're going to war, it presages them seeing blood and possibly on injury or death. So they wouldn't let the men look into that dye lot if it was red. Likewise, they say, well, they're on the war trail. You don't scratch your own self. It might actually draw my own blood. Now, if I'm going to draw my own blood, imagine what the enemy's going to do to me. So they give them a little stick. So technically, I'm not drawing my own blood. If I have to scratch myself from a mosquito bite, mosquitoes, right? So, but they give them a little stick, and they probably carry it right in there with their knife. So, you're talking about native thinking. This has got nothing to do with the Europeans. Zero. There is not one, even during the wars, Now, I'm going to say this, just it puts the whole thing in perspective. These guys are not fighting the same war. There is not one example of a rape on the warfare here on the eastern frontier. Of all the Indian wars, not one. Not one legitimate one. We know of one fake one, and it was in some Pennsylvania newspaper. But it was so totally bogus that everybody knew no Indian would do that. What are you talking about? Everybody, they couldn't even lie about it. It was so unknown to the Indian people. I'm saying that they're fighting a parallel universe here. Their whole lifestyle is not with these people. They might be friendly with these guys. What family was this originally?
Here?
Yep.
Adams.
This was Adams? I knew some Adams. Nice people. A couple actually crazy. Actually, I knew a couple of them were crazy. Remember Richie Adams, the police officer? Boy, he used to chase us around the center of town. I never was in trouble with him, but I respect police officers. But what I'm saying is that the Indian people are not. They have a whole different set of priorities, and rightfully so. But their techniques are ancient techniques of fishing, survival, craft work. Imagine having to weave one of these. I've seen colonial era farmer-made snowshoes, and they look like a 7th grader did it. Looks like a 7th grader history report. Perfectly good for walking over to the barn to milk old Betsy the cow, but not for going 300 miles north through the wilderness to Quebec City, or come down from Three Rivers or Quebec City, raid here, and then return with prisoners on snowshoes. No Englishman ever did that. That's not what they did. They might have chased these guys, 20 miles and then like, all right, I'm done. Or they might have gone up the Saco River to Freiburg. There was a couple of, by the time snowshoe patrols, the snowshoe rangers got up and going, the Indian wars are pretty much over here. But it took the guys that lived here in Chelmsford, Dunstable, where Kingsborough is, and Exeter and York, Maine. These are the frontier guys. And they were the only guys that could go chase these war parties down. They were the only ones. Excuse me. But what delicate art that is. This is beautiful art. And so much so that everything from the pouches to the weavings to basketry, not so much the pottery, it was disappearing very quickly, the technology, but all kinds of these objects are found in Europe. The officers would return back to Europe and bring these collections of these objects back and give them either to their kings or as gentlemen. I'm not saying as the ladies couldn't have done it, but generally it was a gentleman's curiosity cabinet. So when he's having a party on Saturday night, all his other buddies go, and what is this? Well, this is a rare shell from the new islands that we have just discovered. And this is a war club from the savages of North America. I believe it was Huron. Ooh, Huron, I have heard of this word. So everything in the Paris collection is Huron. It's not, but that's what they say, because all the records were lost in the French Revolution when they ransacked the king's palace and took his collection of cool Indian stuff from here. Well, actually, probably more surrounding St. Lawrence, but who knows? The records were gone. So we can just look at them and see war clubs and arrows and snowshoes from this time period. This is gold to us, because we're trying to animate it for museum work and documentary work and research books, and just reenacting living history, as we all like it as a hobby. But what we could call this experimental archaeology. We have learned to make and use all of these items within the law. So some things are illegal to use the way they used it back then, but I could still make one. And this man.
I wanted to ask, what is that made of, and do they use skin or gut to make the snowshoes?
Right. What this is made out of?
Yeah.
This is a ball root. and they cut or a burl on a branch. But usually it's the ball root coming out of an embankment of a river, and it has they'll just sit there and whittle this thing down. But it's the man's life story is on there. So, and it may not be him that actually carved it either. So we have an example where one Ojibwe boy, he's like the author of this study, goes, "Hey kid, where'd you get that?" And he goes, "Well, this is my story. This is my clan. This is my clan symbol here, and I carve it on a tree at the battle site. We stripped the bark and actually put the same hieroglyphics. And this is how many warriors were in my war party, and so on. This arrow is for war. If it was broken, it means I was wounded." There's a whole hieroglyphics. This says many times that he's gone to war, and then the Z connects the two, either wampum belts or a mat. So the mat means I go home to my mat. This is where I live. This is where I eat. I'm born on the mat. I'm buried in my mat. I live and eat on my mat. Our lives are on our mat. So they say, go home, the Mohawks said to the Mohicans when they wanted to join the revolution. Just go home to your mats and be quiet. Don't worry about these colonials versus the redcoats. We'll take care of that. And the Mohicans are like, "Now we're going to Lexington. We're on our way." We're already on our way. They didn't listen to the Mohawks. But that kind of verbiage, using the symbolism of your everyday life. So the mat is everything. So how many mats? It means how many warriors or how many occasions. Because one of the words for a warrior in Mohawk actually refers to them carrying their mats on their back. How many mats are in your party? Oh, it means how many head count. But this says I went to war from war. I didn't even go home. So like Madakawando, when he came and they burned Dover, Durham, Oyster River, they all went back to Pennacook and hung out there, and everybody, all the Kennebecks went back to Maine by canoe, and they came east. They came west through Sevago Lake and Ossipee, and then came down the Merrimack, came to Concord, and then went back the same way. They couldn't go to the ocean anymore because all the English settlement. But Madakawando, Nathan's great-great-grandfather, and the Penobscots said, we're going to go on to Groton. So they went to war from war. So they went and burned Groton to the ground. And every time we go through Groton and these places, I go, your great-grandfather burned that place to the ground. He's like, no, whatever. Yes, ma'am.
So when the Mohicans went to Lexington,
yes, Stockbridge Mohicans.
who were they fighting for? Why would they want to?
So you don't throw rocks when you live in a glass house. You're completely surrounded by the English settlements in Albany and Massachusetts. Everything you depends is on them. You have zero connection with the French whatsoever, other than an occasional. You might hunt up near Otter River in Vermont. That was the limit of the Mohican hunting territory. But really, as they said in the records, I wouldn't make that up. So I'm not. You can ask me how I know anything, and I'll tell you how I know it or why I believe such a. So that's important. It's not just my opinion. I actually have a reason for when I say that. And by the way, this is just the leather. So if we took all the hair off of a deer skin and made it into parchment, just cardboard, no hair. What was that biblical story where he says, if you can be, how did that go? If you can cover this city with this ram skin, then you can marry the king's daughter, or you can be king, or whatever, you can claim victory. So what they did is they just cut a cord around and around and around and around, and you just make an endless cord. And now if you got an animal pelt, especially a deer, sometimes you could see barbed wire scars and ticks, and if you cut a cord and it hit that, it's going to break right on that imperfection. So I always cut around it. But you can just cut. You got good scissors. But in those days, you might have to stick a knife in a board and just very carefully pull it and split it. And they were good at it. And those women would that's all this is, only wet it. And there's different scales of it. So very thin. So it's not gut. They have that also. This is just the animal skin. And this just happens to probably be, well, up north they figured caribou stretches less than deer skin when wet. So that's important. When these things get soft and wet, they tend to stretch. But this is certainly just deer. It could be moose, I guess, but they did notice the difference between different animals, the qualities of different animals had, in different conditions. Like the caribou retains its strength when wet. That's just the thing that you would need to know if you were living out in that area. The Penacooks were, during the colonial wars, were in this no man's land. They've been cut off by the ocean by settlement, so they couldn't go down to the ocean anymore. So they're living at Wamiset on that 100-acre island, just like, they're disarmed. They got some corn growing. They're in a starving condition. The colony promised them to support them. If you guys will do some occasional scouting for our militia groups or warn us of an attack, which they did. And they were going to go to Waldron. They were on their way to Waldron because they got, two Penacooks came in and warned henchmen and the commander here in Chelmsford. He sent a dispatch all the way to Amesbury, and he was going to warn Waldron, you're going to get attacked in the morning. Meanwhile, Waldron's entertaining everybody in his house. Oh, let the poor creatures sleep by the women. He's like, Major, there's an awful lot of Indians in the neighborhood. They're here to trade, they say, trade. But the women want to come in and sleep by your fire in your great room. You can go over here to the house, and you can see by the great fireplace. That was the great room, and everybody's that's where travelers would sleep, And he's like, yeah, let the poor creatures sleep. He says, and then one of the women said, and it's written. She said, so I got to go out and use the facilities. How do I open this gate? Because they were all palisaded. It was a garrison. And, you just unlock it here and open it. She's like, oh, okay. Like in the Trojan horse story. Like, okay. So she just let all the warriors in and they killed Waldron. They did some very nasty things to him. Because he was a rat-fink jerk, murderous jerk. And they never forgot. And that was Waldron. But not so with Chelmsford. Chelmsford had a love-hate relationship, but yet just never really, it was probably good enough that they just weren't, I don't know. It's worth looking into. Why not kill? There was a couple of real good characters here that probably, I'm surprised, weren't killed. But the Penacook were a dwindling tribe. And maybe that might be the bottom line, is that they were just dwindling in numbers. The old Wanalancet and just a handful of people living at Wamiset. And the rest of them were like, have none of this. And even Wanalancet himself had gone up to Chambly, Quebec to stay. So when he came back to Ting to live out his days and beg that he could stay in his homeland. He's buried right there where the Ting Mansion was. He's buried somewhere right there, probably below that rock. There's a ledge right there. Dr. Wang bought the property, and they ripped the Ting Mansion down, where it mysteriously burned. And what a historic site. The steps of the house is still there. The steps. It's a landscaper guide. And if you move that step, you probably find a king pine tree shilling underneath that. Because that's what you do. You put a coin under the front step of a house for good luck. All these colonial houses. Oh yeah. This is a capote, a French capote. So it's a nice garment weight. It doesn't have to be this big, heavy duffel blanket, but it's good for mosquitoes. It's good for a sash. Put a sash around that. But this Wanalancet had been so used to seeing having one in Quebec that he had to get permission from Ting. And Ting wrote it to Boston. You're like, I don't know if he didn't know what it was, which I can't hardly believe, or he was getting permission to get funding to buy one, have one made for, because he wasn't going to give Wanalancet anything. He was going to sell it to him or get paid by the government for having this old guy living there. So I think he lived there 3 years with Ting. But this is one of those very French objects. This is a very French thing. The English don't use these things. They don't know what they are. It's a sailor's garment, really. But the galley slaves on the Mediterranean wore them, but they were brown, because in case they escaped, it's like wearing a striped prison outfit. So the brown capote, oh yeah, he's an escaped galley slave. But here, this is perfect for the wilderness for us. Perfect. This is one of those things that just kind of entered into the culture. Now, this, I wanted to show this because it's kind of cool. Believe it or not, I do have 40 of these. This is hardtack, ship's biscuit. Has the King's broad arrow. It's the Royal Navy. So the French have, and they capture it at sea, but they had barrels of these things. And they would give them out to people, to war parties, to militia companies, to ships' crews, and it's just like, he only had one tooth. This would break that tooth. And you know those guys had great dental hygiene. But what you do is you smash this with your belaying pin or your fid, and you put it in your soup. That's what you did with it. And all it is bread, flour, and water. Triple baked, zero moisture. But it was marked with King's broad arrow. 40 of these, he says, on this. This is perspective. Equals 1 beaver pelt for the hat making in season. 6 knives, 6 common English table knives from the 17th century with these cannon barrel shaped blade handles and all. This is 6 common table knives, nothing special. 6 of these equals 1 beaver pelt. So what he's telling you is 6 of these equals 40 biscuits. Today, if I make a sheath knife, it generally go for about $100. I make reproduction Dutch, English, and French. That's what I make. So it's about $100 with a sheath, right? 40 biscuits for 6 of them. I'm at $600. Are you kidding me for 40 biscuits? So I'm telling you that it says to me, food is number 1 on the frontier. So if you broke this trade list down, which is very fascinating, and you guys, I'll leave you guys, Deb, I'll leave this here because you talk about, I have other copies. We just printed it on parchment paper you can get from Staples or one of those places on the old parchment looking. But as a truck house list, this is telling us that over 1/3 of the objects right on here are cloth. Another third is food. Corn, Indian cornmeal, flour, barrels of pork. Yeah, that's what they were eating. Not very good. Made everybody sick, but hey. You also had alcohol is not on here. Tobacco, 4 pecks of peas, 1 beaver skin. 5 pecks of Indian meal, 1 beaver skin. 5 pecks of Indian corn. Now, a peck is what? How many pecks in a bushel? 2? That's quite a lot, actually. Wow. But then 2 yards of cotton. Cotton is a new thing. Cotton is not normal. It's a new product. Comes from India. In the Calicut, India. So these are printed or striped, or just plain cotton at that time. But it was experimental here and a brand new thing. So some places want the linen trade. So the importers there was always a war between innovation and importing. So depends on what law you're trying to get around, depends on who's in power, whether you can create your own industries here in North America, or not much more than a trickle. If you wanted to go full blown into an industry, some other countries, some sheriff would show up and fine you and have your place shut down or locked down. That's just how it was. But we're New Englanders. We don't care about that. Like, John Hancock was a smuggler. That's why he didn't want search and seizure of his warehouse. That's why they put that, I believe, in the Constitution or in the Bill of Rights. No search and seizure without just cause. But he was a smuggler. It just tells you what's really going on. But these guys were always innovating and just surviving